The Portent Tide Research Podcast is about interviewing researchers and providing an insight into their field and how they think of their field overall. It is specific in exploring and documenting some of their current or past research, from the preconception of their hypothesis right through to the communication of their findings, delving into their decision-making process along the way. And the discussion is generalized in hearing their thoughts on key themes within research and what their line of work takes and requires of them. The aim of Portent Tide is to put the science researchers undertake into a format that is more engaging, with the capacity to reach further out to larger audiences, with a determination to maintain quality and trust with researchers by publishing the discussion in full only upon the approval of the researcher. This podcast is a conversation with Rodolfo Quiros Flores. Rodolfo is a biologist with a focus on botany. He's also the logistical manager of Las Cruces Biological Station, the largest botanical garden in Central America, that also acts as a research station into tropical biology in a region with some of the richest diversity of species on Earth. This is one of the several biological stations of the Organization for Tropical Studies, one of the largest organizations dedicated to tropical research in the world. While Costa Rica is more commonly known for its humid climate and beaches, there is an abundance of mountainous terrain that is home to cooler climates and cloud forests. Las Cruces Biological Station straddles the ascent from the Osa Peninsula up to La Amistad National Park, a vast and wild region of Costa Rica. I came to the station to speak with Rodolfo, or Rodo as he calls himself, to get an idea of how to conduct research successfully in the context of tropical biology. The conversation made his years of experience clear, and same goes for his passion for sharing this place with researchers from all over the world. We largely discussed that as a topic, and how to effectively plan for research, as well as how to navigate core themes and challenges of research. Thank you for listening, and enjoy the podcast. Awesome. All right, well, thank you for having me here, first of all, and it's an absolute pleasure to be here.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Right.
Yeah, so tell us where we are. Introduce yourself, please, first, and tell us where we are.
Okay. My name is Rodolfo Quiros. I am the logistics assistant for the academic groups and the researchers at Las Cruces Biological Station, one out of 3 stations that the Organization for Tropical Studies has in Costa Rica. And this is, to some extent, the smallest one, but also to some extent the nicest one, because it's, all the facilities are embedded into this botanical garden, and just behind us is not only part of the garden but the forest that we are protecting, which is like in total is 365 hectares.
Okay, wow. So this is Wilson Gardens, and I was just reading inside that there's 3,000 international species, and then what was it, 2,000 local, native?
Native, yeah.
And then there's 300 bird species?
More than that.
More than that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Can you paint the picture of why this is such a significant spot within Central America? And also, you know, the Osa Peninsula is right there. It's well known for being one of the most biodiverse places on Earth. How do these factors interact?
Well, first is the history of the garden, actually. The garden is like the face of the station. It's 10 hectares of land out of 365. It started out as a pasture area, like many of those areas that you see around. And this couple, Robert and Catherine Wilson, came from Florida, fell in love with the area, and actually purchased that pasture area. When they purchased that, they also had a piece of land with forest in back. A good part of that forest is, or has been, primary forest since long ago. Other part was secondary forest. That means that there was some disturbance at some point, you know. And in this case, it was like selective timber extraction, you know, like taking out the oaks, taking out the trees in the mahogany family and stuff like that, which are like really good timbers to use in infrastructure and stuff like that. The Wilsons had the idea of having a big nursery, like a botanical garden, to sell plants to people. And in doing this, invested a lot of energy and money into introducing a lot of species that would be nice commercial plants. Okay, so if you walk around the garden, you will see that there are lots of plants that are like lots of exotics. In that case, would be like 60% of all those 3,000 that you mentioned. 3,000 species of plants introduced to the garden. 60% not native, and there you will see lots of ornamentals, lots of fruit trees that are from Asia or from Europe, a few from other places. No, even some species from Australia we have there. The other 40% are native species that are introduced to the garden and that actually have a label. Okay.
Right.
On top of this, the diversity in all that forest that we have there, 355 hectares of forest, we think that it's going to be up to 2,000 different species of native plants, which is adding to those 3,000 of the garden, 2,000 more of this. Now, what is the setting for this? This region of Costa Rica, the southern region, especially not only Osa, as you mentioned, but also the Talamanca range, it's a couple of areas of high endemism. Means that there are lots of species that are only found in either one of those places. And we are in the middle of that. So we are at 1,100 meters elevation. The weather is quite different of what you find in Osa Peninsula, for example, which is a lot rainier than here and it's hotter. But it's in between the lower temperatures that are in Talamanca, and there is less rain there, of course. This means that the diversity is kind of changing from place to place. And the landscape that you will see around here is of fragmentation of the forest. So we have fragments of forest like this one that is like a big island, for example, 365 hectares. But then you find pieces of land that are 10 hectares, 1 hectare, 15 hectares, something like that, which are like either connected or not connected between each other. And those are like mechanisms of holding species separated. In the case of the Talamanca range, it's a huge area. It's like about 250,000 hectares or something like that. It's big. And there you have the fact that it's so high that many species have been isolated there for a long time. Okay? If we think of the glaciation time, there are some species that are in the Talamanca range that are their closer sister species or something like that are from South America, and they were isolated because of there is no more glaciation, more lower temperatures. Otherwise, there would be some connection. So that meant that with the rising of the temperature and also with the rising of the land, because we were under water many thousands of years ago, with the rising of all this, there have been all these changes in the amount of species of like that. The other thing, in terms of, for example, birds, as you mentioned, the high diversity of birds is because it's like a nucleus of fauna, for example. Okay, and when you study, for example, birds, what you find is they like to be in specific areas or different species. For example, we have one species that is endemic to this forest, and it's only in primary forest of the conditions that we have here. So you find it either here at Las Cruces, in an indigenous territory to the west, or across the valley in the Talamanca range. And it's endemic only to those areas, for example.
Wow, okay. So to get deeper into fragmentation, can we discuss what fragmentation is and how maybe we go into edge effects versus inside patch effects?
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, the fragmentation happens when you disturb the landscape. And to have a fragment means that in a big area of land, you have a small piece with, say, forest, in that case. It could also be a lagoon, could be a grassland that is native in that way, but it's surrounded by other environment. In the case of the forest or of the lagoons, for example, they may be in the middle of some pasture areas, okay? And so if the pasture area is like say 50,000 hectares, for example, and you have let's say 50,000 hectares, which is not a good number. Okay, it's too big, but you may have a fragment of forest or a set of fragments of forest that add up to say like 10,000 hectares in that piece of land, meaning that you have a small piece of forest surrounded by or embedded into the pasture. Okay, these may or may not be connected between fragments. Connections happen between creeks and rivers because by law you have to leave vegetation on both sides of the river
as a buffer.
Okay, as a buffer.
Right.
So you make a little corridor like that. In other cases, we have found that the fragments are connected by living fences. The farmer, the owner of the farm, to separate the property, instead of having just like a cement pole with a wire, they plant trees and they attach the wire there. Okay, so all these trees along your fence are also a corridor like that. Okay, it serves a purpose. In many cases, the fragments are just isolated. Nothing is happening to them. Nothing is going, nothing is like living, except for birds, for example, that can fly long distances. Small birds cannot do it. Mammals that are large, they can move to one place to the other, but smaller ones may not do it. And so when you come into the fragment, you will see that when you enter the place, you keep some conditions of the outside, but suddenly they are changing slowly into when you move inside the fragment. Okay, so if your fragment is 1 hectare, we say that your edge effect, this transition, is very large, because say some researchers have measured that the effect of the outside is still felt in significant way 50 meters into the fragment. Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
So if you have a fragment that is like a hectare, then all of it is edge effect.
Right.
But if you have a fragment that is 10 hectares, then here you play with the shape of the fragment.
Yep.
If it is round, it's less edge effect. If it is square, it's some more. If it is rectangular, it's way more. And if it is without shape, like a definite shape, then you have a lot of effect.
Yep.
This means that the temperature, that the light, that the wind are very strong into the inside of the forest, that at least for 50 meters you feel the same conditions that are like almost outside. When you move away or into past those 50 meters into the fragment, then you notice that, okay, there is the light has changed, the temperature also changes, and moisture also changes inside the fragment. Okay, so then you have this new setting of conditions there. All right, when we talk about the plants and animals that we find there, there is a difference also between the ones that are outside the edge, inside the edge, or inside the fragment, the core of the fragment. And then that also increases diversity, because lots of things need different requirements there.
Okay. So as the landscape has become more fragmented, you just said that there was more increase in biodiversity on those edges. Has the biodiversity gone up or down when there's more fragments? Is that something that fluctuates?
In general terms, supposedly it's coming down.
Okay.
Okay, it lowers the diversity because you are losing the right environment for a lot of species, not only plants but also animals. Birds, insects. It's affected a lot. But then, say like, okay, you had a fragment, and you became like a more conservationist person, and you decide to do something about that. Maybe you make a buffer, okay, around the fragment. Then you are increasing the conditions, improving the conditions inside the fragment, and that allows for other things to come that maybe were gone, or to maintain the diversity that you had there. Which means that if you measure something that the diversity inside the fragment, it may fluctuate to some extent. But if the fragment is small, you are losing a lot. If the fragment is large, then you are maintaining a lot. Okay. In the case of our fragment here, 365 hectares, the shape is not like a regular shape. There is a good amount of edge effect on it. But we are thinking, or say like if you see the map, you see it in black and white, it's just that shape. But if you see like a higher resolution, yeah, like a big picture, you notice that okay, there is forest in one side, actually in two sides of the upper part of the fragment. In the western side, you don't have a forest that is like a buffer. Okay, so there is a large connection to the east, better than to the west.
Yep.
Okay, and so but the higher diversity and the higher genetic diversity that we need is actually to the west,
Right.
and we are not connected to that big diversity. This big diversity is in a huge territory, indigenous territory. Okay, there you have like 9,000 hectares of land. Most of it is forest.
Are we talking west of the Pan Pacific Highway, or like are we talking about Pedras Blanca, or are we just talking about immediately west?
Immediately west.
Okay, right.
Yes. No, immediately west. So we are talking about like 5 kilometers away from the station.
Oh,
for
okay.
The borders
Right.
of the station.
Sure.
So it's fairly close to some extent if you see it from the landscape, but it's for like an animal, for a bird, it's pretty far. So in the cases of those species that you need new genetic material, say like monkeys, we only have white-faced capuchin monkeys here, and I don't know exactly the size of the population and the state of the population. But if we were to connect to that indigenous territory that they have 2 or 3 species of monkeys, okay, the genetic pool for the white-faced capuchins will increase if there was that connection. Okay, so we are working on that, towards that actually, but it's gonna be slow. But
Are there Capuchin conservation specialists in this region working on that as we speak? No. Oh, they're not. They're not yet.
No,
Okay.
no. I've been kind of selling the idea to some people that they would be interested in studying the monkeys here, but so far not good.
What would be required? Let's talk about step by step for that to occur. What if you were to study? Is the study done on what would be required, or does more work need to be done?
Well, no, we haven't really done much. First, because we don't have enough people working at the station, and particularly technical, like biologists. We are only 1.5, and you are seeing the one.
Yeah. Okay.
And I'm divided into many different things, but the process would be like finding a person, like a researcher, could be national or international, who would be interested in learning more about isolated populations of monkeys in that case, or mammals, and
Sure.
then monkeys would be one of those. So once you have that person interested, then you decide what to do, and what to do may mean that you have to design a project, and then you have to think about what are the things that you have to put into that. Okay, of course we need money to finance all that, so we need to find also a source of funding. But let's say in an ideal world we would have some funding. This person would design a project which is basically like, okay, going to the forest and looking for the animals and noticing size of the group, also composition, like males, females, and juveniles and babies and stuff like that, and then determining like movements, like distances, territories, and stuff like that. Okay, food items, for example, that's another issue that you put there. That would be like the methodology for that. It's very basic, and it's also like similar in many different places. The only thing that changes is, okay, the species maybe, and also the location, And then particularly we would be interested in something, this kind of information for conservation of the species. To be able to do research in Costa Rica, you need to have a permit, okay? A permit from the government. That permit requires a letter from the station saying, yes, this person will be doing this and that, and it's allowed to do that, okay? So it actually, once we decide what would be the project, we will give this letter to the researcher, and the person will put all the CV and letters and other things that he needs and send these documents to the Ministry of the Environment, and they review it, and then they grant the like a license for research. That's what it's called. And then this person can come over and do the research, for as long as is needed. It may be like 1 week, maybe a month, maybe more, depends. It may need repeated sessions, like, okay, 1 month now in the rainy season, 1 month in the dry season, because there are differences. And also maybe several years, maybe 2 years, maybe 3 years, to see size of the population, if it is increasing or not, finding out diseases, finding out deaths, and in that case, what the death was like a natural thing or was by predation, or which ones are the predators. All these other things you just build up through time, because at first you just go there and you just see, and it's just like a window.
Yeah.
But then once you have several windows, you have a better picture of that.
Okay. Do you guys have trap cameras set up around?
Not that belong to the station. Some
Okay.
researchers have put some of those. Unfortunately, for example, for monkeys, the problem is that the monkeys are from 5 or 10 meters up.
Yeah.
And the cameras are normally put like to watch for ground mammals like cats or peccaries or other things. So they would be like 1 meter, meter and a half above the ground and just looking to one place.
Yep.
And now they are more like, okay, some of them may have like an open angle, so that things are moving farther. You can see them, but also depends on temperature. Infrared. If the distance is too large, they will not notice it. So but for those kind of animals like ground mammals, there have been some people putting some cameras there on the ground.
Okay. So I'm wondering. I'm wondering about the corridor space, and effectively how you would come to interact with the people who are in between two patches, and how that might work. How does that fold out in terms of community engagement, or especially when the process is highly scientific? It's like complex information at times to them that if they're not educated in this area.
Well, we have some experiences with researchers and research projects that actually require to go into the farms of the people, okay? Because being Las Cruces such a small place, relatively speaking, some of the projects need larger contexts, and we cannot offer that inside the station. So they have been working directly with the farmers by requesting permission to work in their farm. So we have some experience on that. We are known already by the community around.
Yeah.
And not only the immediate communities, beyond that, that we are only working for research, that we are responsible, that we are not like damaging the animals or the plants, and if it is required to collect something, is by permission of the person, and the person sometimes is there. So in the case of the corridor, for example, the idea would be to not purchase land, because that's not possible and it's not feasible for our purposes. It would be actually to work with the farmers, to educate them, okay, in many different things, and education not only at the level of the school with their children, but also at the level of the farm with the family, okay. In that way, you are involving different levels and providing information at different levels, so that they understand better what you are doing and what you expect to be done in that place. And we have had some examples. Some couple of people actually came to me personally and asked me, how can we help the corridor? And I said, well, what do you have? And one of the guys said, well, I'm purchasing a piece of land there that has a piece of forest, but it's not really connected. And I said, well, you can make a connection. You can make like living fences or separating a tract of land with fence, that the animals, the cows will not go through. And then you just make like, allow it for to be overgrown, or you plant trees there, And there are programs that facilitate this, the government has a program called uh, environmental services. And in this case, they pay for several things. One of them is reforestation. So if you want to reforest a piece of land, let's say 20 meters across and like a kilometer long, that would be a lot of land actually, like 20 hectares, or I don't know how big. So in that case, you make a project, you present it to the office, and they will give you the money for the planting and for the maintenance for several years. Okay, and then you are not only helping your family, but also you are making the connection like that.
Are they being reimbursed, or is it does the money originally come from the government and then it happens, or do they have to pay for it up front? And
like
then
that, yeah.
They pay for it up front first, and then it.
No. No. The project is no. They give you the money.
They give
you the money. You don't put anything. And well, you get the money anyway.
Right.
So if you started yesterday buying the trees and planting them, and you get the money tomorrow, then you are being reimbursed.
Yeah, sure.
But the money will come anyway,
as
long as the project is
actually approved.
If it wasn't, then you stop your money. But
sure.
But the thing is, there are several things that go into the project. Where is it located? Because of the regions, that they have to give the money to be equal among regions. If the connection, if you are building this up for a connection, like a corridor, if there is like a service, like water, how you call it? Water, like springs and...
irrigation.
For irrigation and stuff. Or if the water would be used for the aqueduct of the community, then you have more value, and then it's good. These kind of things, they evaluate a lot of different things. In the end, normally the projects are approved, and then you get the money to do that. But then every year you have to make a report. And it's not really you as the owner of the farm. It's you have to hire a forester. To be like your regent throughout the project. Okay. And this person does the evaluation and does all the connection and like that. Okay.
Would that be covered by the government as well, the forester, or is that just
that would be the amount of money that you get? Some of that, like a percentage, covers the salary of the person.
Okay. One thing you said in there was that whether they would plant the forest themselves or let it just be overgrown. Do you have a preference between those two?
Natural regeneration, which is the one that is on its own, is normally more preferred than the other one. But if you want to improve the area faster, then you put your hands into it by planting, by throwing seeds, or that kind of thing. Because natural regeneration is really slow. I mean, say for example, from a pasture like this, depending on how bad the soil is, the final conditions before you start doing something else. I mean, if you had cows there for 20 years, the soil is really bad.
Sure.
That will take longer for something to establish. And then you have this sequence of different establishments, like different species come at different times. But if you had like a coffee plantation, it will be faster. Because there are differences, like in an open place, you don't have like perching spaces for birds or for bats or something like that are like really good dispersers of large things. If you don't have that at first, then these things don't come. So what you have is pioneering species that are being blown by the wind or by being brought by birds or something that flies faster and higher than something more local, But if you had a coffee plantation and you just abandon that, or other kind of plantation that you abandon, Then you have perching spaces, you have like a more like a little corridor like that, the environment would be different, and the soil is different there, because of the shade, because of the amount of water that is retained, and plus if you are adding nutrients, then you have a good chance that all the weeds come up. But the most important part in that respect is the perching spaces, you know. And when you have like say just a single tree or a single bush in a place, it becomes what is called a nursing tree. Okay?
Sure.
And this is okay. It's a tree where a lot of birds and bats stop.
Yeah.
And hopefully some of those are fruit-eating birds and bats, and they drop their poop underneath, and then you have like an island. Okay. And from that island you start, it's like planting a seed and then just growing up.
In ideal circumstances, if that process was to occur, how are we talking? 10 years, 20 years, for
Oh
something like
no,
that?
the beginning of it would be 10 years, but
10
the
years.
final product,
Much
say
more.
like researchers say that if you want to reach the same conditions or similar conditions to a primary forest that you had in place, is more than 100 years.
Yeah.
Because beginning with the soil conditions, for example, and then moisture and other things, and then you need the viruses and bacteria that would be in the forest otherwise, and the fungus that need to be there. So if there is not enough leaf litter falling to the soil, if there is no enough coverage to maintain some minimum temperature, like more fresh temperature, if you don't have those minimal conditions, then the vegetation is coming just really slowly. Okay, that's why, for example, if you go to the forest, you have the forest here, you have a pasture there, you see that a lot of vegetation is growing here and it's just moving this way, slowly, slowly. Okay, but say like you had this difference between say like 15 years here and then 1 year here, you see the difference
Yeah, sure.
because this is like the real primary things, real pioneer species. Okay, a few things, but here you have a lot of those more pioneers, but like the ones that take a higher elevation, a higher height of the tree or the plant is and then you have more leaf litter being produced, okay, and then it's accumulating here, and so this thing is getting closer to the conditions that you had there before, by reaching higher, and that's a replacement of the different species. Okay.
Okay, yeah.
So the pioneer species that were here like 15 years ago now are here, and here are a different setting of species, and with the animals is the same. Okay, there are some species that are normally in the forest that you won't find in an open place without any coverage, but as long as you start getting vegetation here, okay, they start moving in. Okay, and then we are talking from worms in the ground to pollinating insects, you know, to a few birds that actually go to the outside of the forest.
Okay. What are the last species to normally arrive in a island?
In terms of plants, would be emergent trees. An emergent tree is like the oaks, for example, and you recognize them because these are trees that have like large seeds um, that may arrive at the same time as the pioneers, but they are able to wait longer,
The dormant, is it? Right?
dormant,
Yeah.
in the soil until the conditions that they need are there. Okay, so something like an oak could be arriving into a regenerating area, say like 1 or 2 years after the regeneration started, and it will not germinate until 30 or 40 years later. And those are the really tall trees. They grow really slow. Um, Even if they germinate, the oaks, for example, they go really slowly, and when there are conditions on the ground and conditions like soil and temperature, they start growing faster. But if there is not those conditions, they go slowly, really slow.
I guess I want to sort of to transition to how we look at how you do research here. And I sort of want to, what I introduced to you earlier, just essentially walk through if there are researchers coming here, or on average when the researchers arrive here, what is their process that they go through from all the way from working on the idea of their hypothesis or simply reading up about what they are curious about to essentially follow that all the way through to when they're writing their discussion and sending that off to whoever they want to be published with.
Yeah. Okay.
So I imagine, when people come here, are they already aware of what they want to study, or how does that work?
And there are the two views. Many already know what they want to do, most of them. Others come like an exploration trip that we call. Say, for example, when you are a student, you are designing your projects. You associate yourself with a person who has a experience or has been working with something, So, for example, say me. Okay, I would like to study. My interest is plant ecology. Okay, where the plants are dispersing, how do they do it, the conditions in the place where they arrive or that they grow. So I find out that I don't know, some doctor, some biologist in the University of Costa Rica or abroad is studying these kind of things, and I contact that person, and they accept me for the program, say master's or PhD or other level. Then I may have an idea already that, okay, I might want to study, say, for example, dispersal of ferns. So I associate myself with a person who is studying ferns, for example. And I go to this person and say, hey, look, I would like to know more about the dispersal of ferns. Okay? But I would also go to that person and say, hey, do you have any idea or any project or anything interesting that you would like to do, that I can do? Okay, both ways like that. So in either case, I start doing this kind of thing, and I start like looking for the information that people have done on this. For example, there is a good book on ecology of ferns, so I would just look into that and say, okay, what is the dispersal of ferns? What is known about it? And maybe there is a piece of information that is missing, and then boom, maybe I join right. that thing, and I just jump into that and try to find out how. So I design a project. Okay, or the professor would say, oh, look, Rodo. Yes, tree ferns are very interesting, and we don't know how they disperse. Okay, so I take that and I study that. In other cases, say I am already graduated, I already had my degree on tree fern dispersal. So now I want to continue that. Okay, so I say, okay, tree ferns in lowlands versus tree ferns in the highlands. So that means I know what I would do as a project. But in other cases, and we have had the case, a professor would come to the station and say, hey, Rodo or Mr. Director or whatever, I have expertise on this. How this can help you understand something. Okay? And so I would say, look, oh, you do ecology of ferns. Yes. Listen, there is a species of tree fern that we think is invasive. Can you study that? Yes? So we can propose also on a project that this person can do. Okay. All right. Let's say that me as a student or Mr. Professor as a professional already want to do a project here. Is the same as I mentioned before. Okay, first we propose the project to the station. The station give us a letter saying, yes, this person can work here and signed by the director. And then this person requests the research permit from the government, and then they come here and they spend the time as needed. We had students that have come first as a student in a course, and normally the OTS courses are research oriented. Okay, So a student went by and said, look at that. Oh, look at that. There's two different species of tree ferns there.
Yeah.
What are the differences between them? So they tried a little project for 1 or 2 days. That's inside the course. They don't need the permit from the station. That's
Okay.
part of it.
Sure.
This student came as a student. Later, he came as a master's degree student, and he chose Las Cruces because he was interested in ferns after
Sure.
being here as a student. And so he found some differences, but now, okay, are the same differences at the garden or inside the forest? So your project, your problem, your question is larger. Okay.
Sure.
Okay. He finishes that. He joins the doctorate program, and he comes to do more on tree ferns, and then diversity of ferns. Okay, not only 2 species, but what are all the species here? So it's larger project, would be longer time, would be repeatedly coming over, to do more research and stuff like that. In each stage, they have to think about, okay, a question. What is the question? Is my question the same now that I am proposing it, or is it the same 5 years later when I am almost done with the thing? Okay? What have I done between? Okay, and then all of this baggage. Okay, if you were here for only 1 month, or if you were here 5 years or 5 seasons, okay, that gives you some extra experience. Okay, so when you are writing a paper for a publication or for your dissertation or something like that, at the end, not only conclusions but also recommendations. Okay?
Sure. Sure.
So, okay, I found out that the tree fern disperses by wind. Okay, but how far do the spores travel? I didn't do that. So I recommend that the next person or me or in another stage would do this kind of thing. Okay, so that's the thing. The reasoning behind all this analysis and stuff like that is based on what you find at first, but then you have to analyze it through statistics, and then you have to really think if that's what you are seeing there, or if there is some okay, the dispersal of the tree fern is to the west, so you have to study the wind direction. Okay, but it happens that there was an air conditioning there, and then it's throwing the seeds on the spores only that direction. You have to think about that too.
Yeah.
Okay. Other factors that may be affecting it. So it's very complicated. Once you are there,
Yeah.
whatever you designed in your lab, in your office, when you come here to the field,
It's
you
reality.
find a lot of different things there.
Okay.
Some students have had to change the project.
They have to start all the way from the start
They
again.
had to change
Okay.
it. They had an idea. They went out to test it. This didn't work as they were thinking.
Okay.
So they had to change it.
What are they getting wrong? Because I do have a general question about how people get engaged in research, and it's in terms of what motivates them. So is it potentially that they're just very curious and they don't know enough yet, or are they approaching a problem that's too difficult for themselves? What is it?
Several factors.
Yeah.
One would be that, for example, in many cases, most of most of our researchers come from temperate regions, northern or southern, mostly northern. And most of them are, say, from the States, Canada, a few from Europe. Let's say these persons probably don't have the experience of being in the tropics, and what they have learned might not be like all of the publications might not be from the tropics. We found out that one person was studying or was designing a project for butterflies, had never been in the tropics before, and all the citations that she had in the project description were from Europe.
Okay.
And I said, okay, the question may be valid if you think to compare whatever you have found in the literature from Europe and you want to compare it to the tropics.
Yeah.
But if you are thinking that this what you are writing is what we will find there, you are wrong. Okay? Yeah. If it is a comparison, you can do that.
Yeah.
But if you are thinking that, okay, this thing is white in Europe, it may be white in the tropics, it may not be.
Right. Okay.
Okay.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So that's one thing. In other cases, Um, I had an example. One person came with the idea of doing something. It was a very short project, and doing this project with a species that she knew and that she had found in the literature that it was common in the tropics. And she came directly to me saying, "Hey, I need to do this project with this specific species because that's my interest." And I said, "Look, I don't know if I don't think if I know that species." And I said, why do you want to do it with that species? Or what do you want to do? You know, so that I get oriented in my mind. And she said, "No, it's because this species is very common." And I said, "Where did you read that?" Because this species may be common, very common in some areas of the tropics, but not in others. Okay? Happened that the species was not in Costa Rica.
Okay, right. So she's
So I saved the moment by asking, okay, what do you want to do? What is your methodology? And what kind of a species do you need to study? And so I found that there, according to the methodology and what she needed to do, there was another species that was similar, not in the same group or something, but same behavior that she wanted, and very, not very common, but common here, that she could use. And then it complemented what she wanted to do. Okay, so not knowing exactly your environment, it's a tricky thing, you know.
so in that way, would it ever be better to start out with a methodology before you've got your hypothesis, or would it? Is it?
No, it depends. Your methodology needs to have the hypothesis first.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you won't know exactly what.
Okay.
But
Just in that situation, it just happened to work out.
Yeah.
You could go backwards.
Yeah, but in
Right.
other cases, for example, say you have a hypothesis, you more or less understand what methodology you can use, and then you apply for or you come as a how it's called, like a pre research, you know. You're just coming over to check if you can find the species, if the methodology could be achievable. Say for example, some people would think, okay, they see Las Cruces in the map in 2 dimensions, and they may need to move a lot to find the things. And then when they come here and the terrain is all broken, what happens? I mean, instead of saying, okay, I move from the garden to river Riojava in half an hour, it will take an hour. Okay, so logistically you have to understand the place. Okay, the location of the species, the amount of individuals for the species. If I wanted to study the monkeys, okay, first I have to move a lot into that forest that is up and down, is very rugged.
Sure.
And
And they
second,
move fast.
yeah, they move fast. Second, how many individuals do I find? Okay, in one day I found 3 troops within 1 hour, but I was moving myself along the trail very fast in one single direction. Okay, I don't know if 3 troops is all what we have. Okay, so in the case of the monkeys, you will have to spend a lot of time just looking for signs to try to be able to find them. Okay, so your methodology is there and it may be, you know, set up, but once you have to put it in place, you need to know the terrain, you need to know the population, you need to know movements, behavior. Okay, if you are just beginning your career, then you may not know about the behavior of the monkeys, and so you are in trouble.
So I can kind of go 2 ways here. I'll go this way first. What's the best way to evaluate risk in choosing a study then? In terms of whether or not it's going to be successful, or whether or not you're prepared to do it, or whatever you may think in regard to risk.
But you do a couple of things. One is just coming over to see if it is feasible to do it, and how feasible it is. You may need to change or adapt some things. You know. Another way to do it is finding out sources that can tell you that. You know, either people who have already done and have more experience, or by the publications and stuff like that. Normally, in the publication, for example, say a group of people studied or made like a big inventory of the mammals around here. So they describe the area, the climate, the terrain, the vegetation, and stuff like that, to associate this to the diversity of mammals, for example. Okay, so you look into publications like that to see what kind of information you find in terms of, okay, first the terrain and anything related to that place. Okay, logistics, close or far from facilities like this or from other things. Isolation of the place or connections, say. Um, but also you have to find out whether the species that you will study is abundant or not. Um, if you choose, for example, to study uh, birds of prey, like this one that is calling, um, okay, are they easily found here or not? So you write to us as the guides, you write to other birders who may know the area, and you ask about this. So you just try to minimize, that when you come here, the risk of not finding what you need or finding it in the way you need.
Sure.
Okay? It's not that you are directing
Yeah.
that. It's just that okay, if you want to study that bird, okay, you have to make sure that it's here. Otherwise, you go to another place.
So there needs to be some flexibility and adaptability to that.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, I did have a point on risk, but I was wondering. So in their search for information. Oh, actually, sorry. The question on risk was how do different organizations factor into one person's from this university, one's from a different university in Europe? Do they provide their research with more flexibility for time to make mistakes? Do you find that?
It depends on your time frame also.
Okay.
If we think about how valuable is for a researcher from the United States to come here in terms of failure and compare that to a person from Germany, it's more expensive for a German person to have failure than to an American.
Of course.
So that's one other point. So let's say researchers from Europe or even from Australia, if they want, because we have an example of some person who wanted to come from New Zealand to do something here. They have to evaluate more, and make sure that things are right there. Okay. So you would write to me saying, "Hey, Rodo, do you have roadside hogs there?" And I said, "Yes, I'm hearing one right now." Okay. And so you say, "Would they be there on such and such time?" I had a student asking me in August if a certain plant was gonna have fruits in November when she had time to come. Think of that.
Right. Okay.
So they have to make sure that things are there at the time that they want to do it. It depends on the subject.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If it is like ecology of something, ecology of, I don't know, fish in the river, they will be there always, no matter what species.
Sure.
Okay, part of your research will be what species are there. Okay, but if you want to study that bird, that's something else. Depends also on the scale that you want to do, and it's more risky if you are narrowing your scale.
Sure. And I suppose you just touched on it, the idea of failure. I mean, failure can mean several things. It could mean that you just didn't get the results you wanted, but then there's the kind of failure you're talking about, it sounds like, is where it's just like you weren't prepared.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate on how that might be seen in researchers that have come here or research that you've seen personally?
Well, they feel frustrated. And no matter what, you may feel frustrated. For example, you come to do this work, and I don't show up. The researchers are busy and they don't show up. You just recorded birds and plants. Okay,
right.
But you felt frustrated because you couldn't interact with a researcher or with another person.
Of course.
I had that situation in the indigenous territory with a group of students. I had made the connection with the person in the reserve, in the territory, wrote a letter requesting permission to go there because that's, you have to go. And when I went with the students, nobody showed up.
Right.
So I had to pick up trash from the streets, just to do something with the students. But the meetings that we wanted, and the professor was disappointed. So if you are a researcher and you don't find things, you are disappointed. But if you don't find what you expected to find, that's a result. It may be that that bird is not here. Okay, you didn't know. You might have asked somebody before, but if you didn't, and you just came and you didn't find it, that's a result. I mean, this bird is not here. Okay? So okay, so then okay, maybe I change. I I talk to the naturalist here. Hey, Jason, have you seen the roadside hawk in other places other than Las Cruces? Oh yeah, in the ta. Okay, okay. So that's one thing. The other thing is that okay, if you are frustrated that you don't find that, you change whatever you want to do. Okay, maybe then roadside hawk is not here, but what about the black and white? I don't know, eagle or whatever. Yeah, that's there. Maybe I can do that instead of the other. Okay, and then your frustration actually becomes like an opportunity. Okay, so in many cases, um, not really many actually. The person comes prepared for either this or the other.
This is plan B.
Most of the people come and they have already studied things. For example, one project that is coming up in maybe 6 months or something. The interested person, who is a person that we know already, asked me, Rodo, do you have any ideas on what was the thing? It was about hummingbirds, distribution of species of hummingbirds, distribution of species of hummingbirds. And I said, well, I don't know that, but there has been a person who has studied this and collecting information on that. So I provided the direction of this person and they connected and they already have the idea of the project that they want to do. And so now they know more. And in other cases, they don't, they came, for example, one student came and she had an idea of something that they wanted to do, it was about diversity of birds along the water courses. Remember that I mentioned that should be a buffer of vegetation along the creeks and rivers. Mm-hmm. So she wanted to put like recorders, like microphones and recorder in the forest, in the along the rivers, different places, to to record sounds of birds, and then they would analyze this with a computer program to separate the sounds and then identifying the species. Well, they did. They came. Spent some time going to the rivers that they wanted because they had seen them in the map. They didn't realize in the map how far they were. They didn't realize the how easy it was to get into the place. And then the problem was the noise in the river that masked the recordings of the songs. So there was this problem there. Okay, so when they were analyzing this kind of thing, they decided, like this is not gonna work. Okay, so there was some logistics problem that brought the project to the ground. So there were some corrections but eventually they had to change the project. So
sounds like you've got a lot of the solutions though for them. Like it's clearly helpful to have someone like you who's based here.
It's not all my solutions. I mean, sometimes it's just like knowing the person at the moment. Okay, for example, if like this guy who wanted to do hummingbird distribution, there had been another person who had done this before, so I just made the connection. Somebody also asked for frogs. I said, well, I don't know exactly about that species, but let me ask this other person, and then I made the connection, like that. It is tough when the person is already inside. If you are asking sometime before, you may correct things. But if you just arrived yesterday, you ask me today, how can I help you with that? I just have to figure out what in the moment, and I may not have the answer like that. The person may know that, okay, we didn't find, say, like that frog, but what about another frog, or what about another organism that may have the same behavior or similar or something? So that kind of thing. So it's not that I am always offering solutions, because sometimes I'm not, but it's just being there at the time and being a support actually for them.
Right. Well, two different questions. I'm interested in what part researchers get the most satisfaction out of, and also what part do you gain the most satisfaction out of after just saying that you enjoy kind of helping people. But
yeah, it's like in my job, what I enjoy is actually helping the people. I cannot go with them to the forest or something like that to be there, and although I do sometimes, but my job here in relation to research is like, okay, before, during, and after, but it's like on the side. Okay, I am the assistant that, okay, if they need a letter from the station, if they need to send the papers to the MINAE, if they need like alcohol before they come, I have everything helping them like
just to
that.
get drunk before they can come.
Then they are here, okay, keys to the lab, connections with the farmers, more alcohol that they need, or petri dishes, or I don't know what, all these kind of things. And if we can have lunch to go, yes, you can,
Yep.
or can you request a taxi? Okay, this is the number, and okay. And then after, because sometimes there is something that needs to be done, like, okay, there was a project that needed to be changing batteries for a microphone every 2 weeks. So, okay, no problem. It's just half an hour going in and out, and that's it, or maybe somebody left something here that needs to be sent after, so I process that, for example. So that's is good, I like the interaction with the people because I'm learning. I read all the project descriptions. I sit with them to talk about the project. Maybe I have the chance to go and visit the project at some point, to learn, because eventually all that information comes to me. And my other hat sometimes is environmental educator with children from school, or young people from high school. I am also a tourist guide, so with the natural history visitors, helping them and understand things. And also I need to do like lectures for the academic groups to come. So normally they ask, okay, what kind of projects are done here? Okay, so I can tell them like that. In terms of projects that are like satisfying or really nice, there was a beautiful one. I mean, all of them are, in a way,
Yeah,
But this one was very, very interesting because it was about the movement of the wings of the hummingbirds. The hummingbirds flip their wings very quickly and in a given pattern. So this student set up a set of cameras around a cage. Several cameras, a plate on top and a plate at the bottom that were like with some electromagnetism or something, I don't know what. And they released a hummingbird there. So all the cameras were synchronized from different angles to record the movement of the hummingbird.
Mm-hmm.
And the plates were actually measuring the pressure, the change of pressure of the movement of the wings.
Wow, that's cool.
Very much.
Yeah. How did they? I mean, where did they read that? The electromagnetism idea.
This was I think it was a mechanical engineering student, and so there is all this knowledge already there.
That's fascinating, because so much of what I think is interesting about research is when people want to do blue sky projects, and that to me sounds almost like a very much, well, it has practical understanding, but
Oh,
it's
yeah,
fascinating.
much, a
It's
lot.
fascinating.
So there's another one that also related to hummingbirds. The question was, how long does the hummingbird stay in front of the flower or visiting the flower? So you have the flower here, you have the hummingbird coming over. So how long they will stay here?
Yeah.
It's very quick.
Right.
But how long?
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Does anybody know? And how would you know that?
No.
So they got they made some rings, wire rings, connected to a timer and a source of electricity, and put on the hummingbirds put a like a bead of some kind
Mm-hmm.
that when going through that ring
Yeah.
made the connection of the circuit and measure the time that they went in and out. And they repeated this for a long time, but the ring had to be one size, and specific. So they had to make all these rings that were similar, and needed a lot of batteries and stuff because they wanted to do the thing. And the thing is, okay, say you have a set of flowers there. How you know which one the bird is gonna choose?
Yeah.
So they decided that okay, this flower was going to be the only one that was available for the hummingbird. So they covered the other ones and allowed this one to be there. Okay? And so they put the ring on that one,
Yeah.
and the hummingbird went in there.
Got it.
Like that.
How long was it? How long? Did
I don't know, it's seconds, like maybe 2
So they were
seconds.
going milliseconds, right?
It's very quick. The other thing was another one that has been really nice is the discovering of a lizard that goes into the water, lives along the rivers and creeks.
Okay. Not
Here.
best. Oh, here. Okay. Okay.
And then it jumps into the water when it's threatened by a predator or something, or it's just disturbed by something. So it jumps into the water, and the researchers, they noticed that the lizard stayed there for a while. And then they said, how come this lizard stays there for that long? I mean, the predator arrives, the response is very quick. Is that enough for them to breathe and hold the breathing to be in there? But for how long? Right. So they set up cameras, this GoPro that you can put underneath the water, and when the lizard jumped there, they just follow that and made the video. And you know what they discovered? The nose of the lizard is kind of long and has a different shape, like a curve. Okay. And when it jumps into the water, holds a bubble of air. And so they are snorkeling.
Wow.
With that.
And so, is it that just this species that does this, or is it?
Apparently.
Oh wow.
But there are a few species that are associated to water courses that may have the same behavior. But this is the first one that is documented.
That is really cool.
Mm-hmm.
And that was done here.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
So that kind of thing.
Well, I wonder. So people gain a lot of satisfaction out of doing the field work. Is that normal? Do you find that commonplace between everybody, or are there people who find more satisfaction out of the search or the or getting things wrong and then figuring out a new solution, or the report writing?
There are both things.
Yeah.
Both things. Yeah. A lot of people are into the field. Well, it's changing. I mean, 20 years ago when I started working here, there were more people oriented into doing field things. Now they are switching, or the people are going into lab stuff. But still, to do a lot of different things in the lab, you need the field. The field component. But also depends on the stage of your career. Maybe you already have done a lot of field work. You have piled up a lot of samples, for example, that you may or may not have had the time to identify. So now you are spending more time in the lab or in the museum or something, instead of coming here. Um, Also, the experience that you have gained from the field allows you for being like a source of information for other person, for example. And so, say like in many cases, I also just mentioned a student who came as a student in the course and went all the way to doctorate, doing projects here, and being more complicated every so often. Now he's a professor, and he's planning to bring students here, particularly in courses, and then motivating them to do work in the field. Um, because of the facilities that we have in the lab are not really big. You cannot do like a real analysis of DNA here, for example. We don't have the facilities for that. It's mostly field thing. So far it's like, say, like maybe, I don't know, I would say 75% of all the projects being field and 25 being lab, depending on what. But still, those need something to be collected in the field or something like that.
So you might find that there's a lot of field specialists and then maybe lab specialists as well, or do you find there's lots of crossover between?
There's a crossover.
Crossover.
Yeah, there are people going from one to the other, and sometimes depending on what you do, even if your thing is only in the field. For example, if I am interested in diversity or distribution of tree ferns, for example, one thing that I need to do in the lab or in the herbarium is to identify them. Okay, so I collect samples from the plants, process them, and go to the herbarium to identify. But then I go to the field to count, make my plots, count the number of plants that I find, and this, and then I have to say, okay, this is from this species, this is from the other species, and this species A has like 20 individuals, this one has one. Okay, but I had to know the species before or on the course of it, But I do have to use some time to do something else, Or I can use another resource person for that. I say, okay, in my case, tree ferns. So I ask you, you are a botanist in the herbarium. So then
What was that?
what was that? I don't know what it is. Ah, it's it's a true bug. It's a homopteron. It's like a cicada.
It was right on you, right about to go into you, yeah.
Those kind of things happen, Anyway, so I ask you you are the botanist here, and then I ask you, hey, what is this species of fern? Because I'm doing this and there, So I can use different resources for that, or I can do myself, or I can do something else, somebody else. There are guides also, like written guides with pictures, and then I can use that, or I can go into the internet and do it. Okay, but yes, there is a lot of people who have a leg on one side and the other on another. In the field and lab or something.
Where is the closest lab that does do the DNA work if they want?
It's in San Jose.
It's in San Jose.
San Jose. The universities have, and also there is a specialized. Well, depends. I mean, for research, it's mostly associated to the universities.
So with the advancement of technology that engages in genetics, have you seen differences in what people are looking for here?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
For example, some people want to do. It's called barcoding. It's like, okay, say viruses in the ground or bacteria. Okay, you cannot probably distinguish them one by one. So what you do is, okay, pick up soil from different places, different conditions, open, forest, pasture, coffee, and bring that, and then make like a process, lab process, to separate the DNA of the species, and then, as I said, it's called barcoding. I don't really know exactly how it works, but then you have all these distinctions of the DNA, and then you know what species they are or associate them. Somebody has studied the species one by one, and then if they have the DNA, and then you have the sequence there, and it's in your picture, then boom, this is a species. If it is not, then look at that. There may be a new species, just from there. Processing a project, the permit for a project like that takes longer, way longer. If it is just field thing, observation and measurement, maybe collecting, it's like a month to get the permit.
Right.
To get DNA permits is 6 months. It takes longer.
Well, how come?
And there is more revision of your process or your methodology. And there is also more paperwork to be done, and it's done by a different office than other than the permit office is different. So it takes longer, and it's I mean it has to be done. It's done electronically, but even there they have to review more and they have to make sure that things are okay, because DNA is a big resource for the country, and so say like if you find viruses there, maybe a virus like that is good for something, okay, then the government has to make sure that any royalties come to the country and stuff like that, and so it's a little bit different, but you know.
That's interesting. I think to conclude, I want to talk about in terms of communicating people's work. So once they're done here, well, what's your view on science communication as it stands now?
It's has changed. When I studied biology many years ago, we all depended on printed things. Now you can read a paper in your palm, you know, in your telephone, because it's online. It's faster to be out there. More people can read it. It's searchable, so no matter where you are, you can actually figure out. Okay, if you are in Australia and you want to know about a specific species of tree, you know what it is because people are publishing that. You know, there are different kinds of information published. Say like your dissertation, okay, is one set of information. From there, you may take one or two or more papers to publish in a journal, online or written, peer reviewed, that is called. But also, you can do a blog based on what you found. Okay, you can talk to the press, say like having an interview about I don't know whatever, like the tree ferns. You know, oh, the tree ferns are da da da, and then you just have you appear in a newspaper saying about this because it was your research, for example. So I think now is more widespread, more people can reach, and more people can learn. And it's not only academic; it's more than that. You know.
You just talking about biomechanics.
Yeah.
Earlier. You're right.
Yeah. Used to be more academic. I mean, only the people who knew about biology or about mechanics would read that paper.
Sure.
But now that there are more applications, that there are more access to the information, okay, and demand actually of the information, then we are reaching out the farmers out there, okay, with newspapers maybe, with a blog, with a newsletter. For example, in our case, every 6 months we produce this newsletter. It's called the Amigos newsletter or the Friends of the Station. And I normally put two little articles of a summary of what a researcher has done. And it's not me who is writing it. I ask the person, hey, I don't know, Darko, it's a Chilean person. Would you write me a little note, like 1 page, about what you found about this? They found a frog that was being eaten by a spider, and they documented that.
What? Okay.
And so, hey, prey item for the spider,
That's interesting.
and a predator for the frog. Interesting. So publication.
Yeah.
Okay, they did. It's already published. And so now I requested him to write me a little piece with a picture to show in the newsletter. Okay, and I'm reaching out to tourists, to donors, to different kinds of people there. You know, like that.
And how do you see engagement different? Well, if you break it up to locally, just within this region, versus Costa Rica versus internationally.
It's still outside. It's still outside. I mean, it has improved, but it's still like say 75, 25.
So 75% international, 25% local.
25 local.
Okay.
You know, it's still a gap.
Okay.
We need to bring it closer, you know, through different means. If I were ambitious, I would say there is a TV station here in San Vito that, you know,
Right.
if they were interested, maybe we could be doing documentaries, like short things,
Sure.
you know.
Yeah.
And they have a good audience. I know that because there is a cable system here, then people see it in that.
That's on television.
System. Yeah.
Okay.
And we don't have a newspaper here in locally, but there are newsletters that different organizations produce, you know, that you can reach through there. There are regional newspapers, and if we wanted to do something, then we could also do it. You know, write a note and send it to the newspaper, and they may publish it. But we haven't done it so far, and it's because, to some extent, the information is not ours. It's the researcher who is doing it. So I need to get permission from that person, or suggest to that person, why don't you just send this kind of information to that, so that they. And there is a limit. There is a limitation, that is the language.
Sure.
Many many, because not all, but many of the publications are in English mostly. A few in French or German, and a few in Spanish, but done locally, you know, done by Costa Ricans or something. Unless the person wants to reach to the community here, they will do something in Spanish, for example.
Okay.
But then there are other ways, not only printed or published like that. Some of the researchers wanted to say thank you to the farmers around here by having a lecture, and so bringing them here, providing some coffee and pastries, and then having a lecture on whatever they were doing. We also had a big meeting with like a symposium with researchers who have been working here, and we were asking about what we have learned about fragmentation, for example. Okay, and so we invited different people, and they just came to talk, presented posters, and you know, it was like very nice thing. Couple of days, a good number of people came, and then the interaction with the researcher, you know, between a farmer or a local person with the researcher who is there, and you know, and they know different things, and so maybe that connection also not only helps the farmer to understand a little more what is there in the farm, but also to the researcher that, okay, maybe the fragment was different because of the history of the fragment or the history of our whatever was around, and the farmer has that information. Or maybe it wasn't the owner at the moment, but maybe it was his father, and he can connect to the father, for example, or something like that. I don't know.
So basically, what you're suggesting is, after the media gets out there, the feedback has been well, it sounds like it's overwhelming in that
we
sense.
need to we work more on that feedback, but you know, it's there, and it's interesting. It's nice connection.
I guess the final question is: you said you have high school kids and kids coming through. Are you finding that they're learning? Are they reading papers, or are they more absorbed, say, in different forms of technology, and then they're coming in?
Well, we haven't explored going into technology yet, but they come here, and the professors normally ask about, like, a guided walk. Will be 2 hours, 3 hours, depend, on a subject that they are studying in this class, and they know that we have knowledge and other resources. So either I produce like a presentation talking about that, but my classroom is actually out there. I prefer that. So if I know about the subject, or I study a little more, then I can find things out there, and then bring the students there. For example, one day we did a little project on the pollination. Yeah. So the professor asked, "Hey, Rodo, can you talk to us about the different kinds of pollination and this and that?" And I said, "Yes, I can do it. Well, why not? It's part of my field." But I said, it would be better for the student to go and then learn it in front of the plant than me giving them a lecture there in black and white. You know. So I just went out, found a few plants that had flowers, different kinds of flowers. And I said, okay, this one is for bees, this one is for da da da. So I marked them with a number. When the students came, we didn't say anything about pollination at all. I just said, we're going there. I have a few plants that are marked. Make little groups of 3. Take this piece of paper and an envelope from there. The envelope had the name of the plant species. They had to go find it. Sit there, look, measure, draw, whatever they wanted to do with the flower, and then wait to see who came to the flower. Right? And out of those things that came to the flower, they had to tell us which one was the pollinator of that thing. And then after they told us in a presentation, and then how was the presentation? The presentation was not, I studied this species and this I that. No. You cannot do that. You have to show me in an artistic way what you did.
Right.
So they wrote poems, they wrote songs, they were dancing. They actually, I had paper and other things, they made like the flower shape, and one person was holding the flower, and I am such and such, and my size is such and such, and I color da da da. And then they had this bee coming. I am the bee who came here, da 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 da, and I stop on the petals of the flower, and so they put the flower, the bee. But then there came this butterfly. I am the butterfly, and I stuck my long tongue into the center of the flower to find the nectar that was at the bottom of it. They wrote this. We made a chart on the board, who were the visitors and who they thought there was the pollinator, and then I connected the kind of flower with the pollinator, and then I gave that a name for pollination. Like the syndrome. Okay, this is the syndrome of flowers that are being pollinated by hummingbirds. The flowers are such and such, in that have a shape. The nectar is in such and such place. Da 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 da. Yes? And the pollinator has a shape like this or size like that, and da da da, and that's the connection. Okay, and that's when I talk like a lecture. But before they were there.
So you get the engagement first and then follow it up.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that touches on everything. That was awesome. It was really interesting to hear. You can only see so much. So when you speak to someone who knows the place like yourself, and you see the relationships that you might not see. Well, you might see from the sky, but you can't see from. It's
to some extent, that's rewarding actually to be able to transmit, from the researcher to a student, for example, from the high school or from the elementary school, to give information like that. And in a 2-hour walk, I can talk about, I don't know, things that I see there that I have learned from being there, or things that I have learned from the researchers, like easily maybe 10 projects, for example.
Yeah.
And then in 2 hours, you don't know that I mentioned that.
Yeah.
It's so many things that you can talk about.
Well, yeah, you've mentioned. Well, I'll count later. I'll count. It has to be over like 30, at least 30.
No, not. Yeah.
All right.
Awesome. But there have been a lot of projects here, but.
Oh well, I haven't asked you how many papers have been published out of here.
I'm not sure. I'm not really sure. I do have a number in my brain somewhere, but I'm confusing it with another station that we have. From the other station up in Las Alturas, it's at least 100 papers because it's not a visited station and it's very slow. But here, maybe like 25 papers a year.
25 papers. Okay, and
Maybe
you've been going.
more.
When did you guys start? Was it this?
Oh, the station started out as a station in 75. So not like a regularly 25 per year, but I would be.
It's a reasonable amount.
Reasonable number. Yeah. So.
Not bad.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Sweet.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Portent Tide is independent from the researchers on the podcast. If you wish to support them in any manner,
A link is provided from the researcher to allow for this. This can be found on Portent Tide YouTube channel, Instagram, and directly through the Portent Tide website. If you enjoyed the podcast and you wish to support Portent Tide produce more conversations like this that provide an insight into how researchers work, you can do so directly through the links provided on the Portent Tide website or through wherever you found this podcast. Thank you again for listening, and any support and feedback is much appreciated.